It's a good idea to take a look at your key and color chart before you begin to get an idea of what you're starting. My kits use DMC brand thread, so the colors and numbers will all be consistent with that brand. A good chart will have both the color name and number for quick reference. Most beginner designs use 2 strands for all the stitches, and we'll talk more about strands in one of the next videos. A good chart will also have some indication of how much thread is needed, likely in yards of thread and also hopefully in numbers of stitches. I include an extra 10% of thread in my kits, so you hopefully won't run out even if you make a few mistakes. If you do, just email me. Fold your cloth in quarters and either lightly crease it or mark the back with a pencil to find your center. Look on your chart either for arrows or extra thick grid lines that tell you where the center of your chart is. If there are multiple colors around the center, it doesn't really matter which you start with. Some people like to go dark thread to light because it's easier to see and use for landmarking, and also because there's a risk of light colors getting grimy as you handle the piece a lot, so some people save them for the end. If there are no stitches at the center, start nearby at a large patch of color. Make sure you count really carefully to be sure you start in the right place. You don't have to start in the center, but it's the easiest way to make sure your design is in the right place and you don't accidentally run off the edge. If you start anywhere else, count really carefully out from the center, not in from an edge. As a beginner, you want to work with a length about as long as your arm or shorter. Shorter is easier to work with because it gets tangled less. However, shorter pieces mean more starting and stopping, so there's more waste. Just something to keep in mind as you're prepping your thread. So start by measuring out a piece about twice as long as your arm, because we're going to be folding it in half. When we were looking at the color key earlier, I pointed out that it says you'll be stitching with 2 strands. Embroidery floss comes in 6-strand threads, so you'll need to separate it out. We're going to peel out 1 strand, and here's a great trick for how to do that. At the edge of your floss, tease out a single strand. Pinch it in one hand. With the other hand, slide the other strands straight down, pinching lightly but firmly. The other 5 strands should bunch up and then easily release without getting tangled. Set those other 5 strands aside somewhere safe for later. When you need another one, you can repeat the same peeling process. I find the loop start to be the easiest way to start a new piece of thread, but keep in mind it only works if your chart calls for 2 strands. Take the 1 strand you've separated out and fold it in half, so at one end you have the cut pieces and at the other end you have a loop. If the ends are fuzzy, you can give them a little trim so they're easier to work with. Thread the needle with both of those cut ends. Find the center of your cloth again and bring the needle up from the back to the front, then back down through the hole diagonally above it. Don't pull the thread completely through either hole. Flip your cloth over and pass the needle through the loop in the thread, then pull gently to tighten. Don't over-tighten or over-pull. Now your thread is secure on your cloth with no need to tie a knot. You already made your first stitch when you did the loop start. Now you'll continue down the row, making the same single diagonal stitch in each box. When you get to the end of the row, you'll turn around and come back, making repeated diagonal stitches going the opposite direction to finish your X's. It doesn't matter if you go bottom corner to top or top corner to bottom. What you should try to do though is make sure you're consistent with which stitch is on top and which is underneath, whether it's the left leaning or the right leaning. Being consistent will lead to a cleaner and more even looking finished project. When you're ready to move to a new row, start again with doing stitches in one direction, then come back doing the other direction. Sometimes your stitches aren't in nice rows, but are scattered around or have a lot of space between them. Scattered stitches are called confetti, and moving between sections with the same color is called traveling. Confetti can be tedious or tricky to work with, but it really gives a lot of depth and subtle detail to a project. Some people leave confetti until the end so they can fill in blank spaces without too much counting needed, and some people like to do it as they go along so they can be completely done with one color at a time. In both cases, it's up to you whether you want to keep the same thread and pull it along the back of a project, or end your thread and start a new one. A good rule of thumb is if there are 10 or fewer boxes between sections, keep going with the same thread. If there are more than 10, end your thread and start fresh in the new section. When you finished a section, or are within about 2 inches of the end of your piece of thread, you'll need to anchor it down. To do this, turn your project over and pass your needle under 5 or 6 existing stitches on the back. Release the rest of the thread from your needle and clip off any extra thread. If you have a good length of thread left, you can reuse it for your next section, either by folding it in half and doing the loop method again, or if it's too short, you can tie 2 pieces together to make the loop.